A forever home. It's a beautiful phrase, a sacred vow whispered in the hopeful, echoing aisles of animal shelters, a verbal contract spoken over the eager panting of a dog who has no idea its life is about to change. It suggests unconditional safety, a port in the storm, and a love that will never waver. It's the happy ending every abandoned, confused, and lonely animal dreams of: a warm bed to curl up in, a belly that is always full, a hand that will always be there to scratch behind the ears, and a voice that will always call its name with affection. It is the ultimate promise of security in a world that has, for them, been anything but. But what happens when forever has a hidden expiration date? What happens when that beautiful, life-altering promise is revealed to be as fragile as a paper receipt, easily crumpled, forgotten, and tossed aside like yesterday's garbage? For a gentle soul named Max, forever lasted exactly 1,825 days. 5 years. He had been adopted as a bouncy, optimistic 3-year-old, a handsome mix of Labrador and something undefined, all glossy black fur, boundless energy, and a tail that seemed to have a mind of its own. He was the kind of dog that made you believe in pure, uncomplicated joy. Now, at 8 years old, he was gracefully entering the dignified twilight of his life. His once jet-black muzzle was now generously dusted with a distinguished silver, a crown of wisdom earned through years of loyalty. His once dark, sharp eyes were getting a bit cloudy around the edges, a gentle blue haze that gave him a perpetually wise and soulful expression. He was like a beloved classic novel, its cover a little worn from love and time, its spine creased from being opened again and again, but whose story inside was richer, deeper, and more profound than any glossy new paperback. His capacity for love, his deep, unwavering loyalty, the steady, rhythmic thump of his tail at the mere sound of his person's voice, that was all exactly the same. By every conceivable measure, he was a good boy, he had a family, he was home, or so he thought. The bright, sterile, almost painfully vivid lights of the PetSmart were a jarring shock to his senses, a stark, unwelcome contrast to the familiar, dim comfort of his living room couch. The smells were a chaotic symphony he couldn't decipher, a confusing jumble of strange animals, cloying perfumes, and the sharp, antiseptic scent of floor cleaner. He sat patiently on the slick, gleaming linoleum floor, his claws making soft, clicking sounds as he shifted his weight. A quiet metronome, in the vast, impersonal space. He was right next to the woman who had been his entire world for 5 years. Her hand, the very same one that had fed him thousands of meals, thrown countless tennis balls, and scratched that one itchy spot right above his tail, now held his leash with a loose, strangely disconnected grip. He didn't understand why they were there. For a new squeaky toy? A bag of his favorite salmon-flavored treats? He looked up at her, his cloudy eyes searching for her familiar, loving gaze, the one that always made his tail thump against the floor. But she refused to look down. She stared straight ahead, her jaw set, her eyes fixed on the checkout counter as if it were a finish line she was desperate to cross. She was looking at anywhere and anything but the trusting face of the dog who adored her without question. Now PetSmart, like any retail giant, has a return policy. It's printed clearly on their receipts. 60 days for most items, with the original packaging. For live animals like fish, hamsters, or reptiles, it's 14 days, a small window to account for the fragility of a new life in a new environment. But there is no fine print, no hidden clause, no section in any corporate manual for returning a dog you adopted from a partner shelter half a decade ago. It is not a category of transaction that exists because it is not supposed to be a transaction at all. It is the abdication of a sacred duty. It is the surrendering of a life. It is giving up. And that is precisely when Liam, a 24-year-old history major moonlighting behind the register to pay for his textbooks, stepped unwittingly from a mundane Tuesday afternoon into the dead center of this unfolding tragedy. He had noticed them the moment they walked in. It was impossible not to. There was a quiet dignity about the old dog, a calm patience that stood in stark contrast to the palpable tension radiating from the woman holding his leash. She walked with a purpose that felt more like fleeing than shopping. Liam felt a familiar cold knot begin to form in the pit of his stomach, the same one he got whenever he saw someone handling their pet with impatience or indifference. He was a history major because he believed in the weight of the past, in the power of stories, and in the idea that we are all defined by the promises we keep. And he saw a story in this old dog, a history written in the silver of his fur and the gentle trust in his eyes. When the woman finally reached his counter, she didn't place any items on it. She just stood there for a moment, the silence stretching uncomfortably, before delivering the request that would shatter the store's quiet and spark a global confrontation. "I need to return this dog." Liam felt the air leave his lungs. The words didn't compute. They were a nonsensical arrangement of sounds. He was sure he had misheard her over the hum of the aquarium filters. "I'm sorry? He asked, leaning forward slightly, his friendly customer service smile faltering. "I need to return him," she repeated, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, as if she were discussing a defective toaster or a bag of kibble that had gone stale. "I can't keep him anymore." Hearing her voice, that beloved, familiar sound, Max's tail, which had been still with uncertainty, thumped once more against the linoleum floor. Thump, thump. A wave of relief washed over him. She was talking. Everything was fine. Liam's eyes darted from the woman's tense, unreadable face down to Max's gentle, upturned one. He saw the silver fur around his eyes, the slightly stooped posture of a senior dog who had lived a full life, the quiet hope in his gaze. This wasn't some rambunctious puppy that turned out to be more work than expected. This wasn't a case of a family discovering an unforeseen allergy. This was a family member, a companion of 5 years, being discussed and dismissed like an old winter coat that no longer fit the current fashion. And in that split second, as the cold, hard reality of her words crashed down on him, something deep inside Liam, some fundamental gear of his conscience, snapped. The history major who studied the rise and fall of civilizations, the quiet retail worker who just wanted to get through his shift, was gone. In his place stood someone who was about to draw a line in the sand. Section 1. The rant that shook the internet. This is the moment a bystander named Jessica, who was idly examining a display of orthopedic dog beds on the next aisle over, felt the tension in the store become a physical thing. It was thick, suffocating, and charged with an unspoken wrongness. She glanced over and saw the scene. The stone-faced woman, the confused old dog, and the young employee whose face was rapidly flushing with a mixture of disbelief and rage. Sensing that something deeply, fundamentally wrong was about to happen, she quietly and almost instinctively pulled out her phone and started filming. At first, the sound is muffled by the ambient store noise, but then Liam's voice cuts through, sharp, clear, and trembling, with a fury that was anything but professional. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is not a toaster you can bring back because it stopped making toast," Liam began, his hands gripping the edge of the countertop so hard his knuckles had gone white. He was leaning forward, his blue polo shirt suddenly feeling like a costume. "This is a living, breathing being. This is a soul. And this," he said, his voice dropping as he gestured toward the dog, "is Max." He had remembered the dog's name from the adoption paperwork she'd slapped on the counter. The fact that she could speak his name, the name she had likely called out with love 1,000 times while simultaneously trying to abandon him, seemed to light the final fuse of his indignation. It was a betrayal of the deepest kind. "Look at him," Liam pleaded, his voice cracking with an emotion he wasn't trying to hide. He pointed a trembling finger toward the dog. "He's looking at you right now with absolutely no idea what you're doing. He has no clue. To him, this is just a fun trip to the store with his favorite person. He has spent 5 years of his life, every single morning, afternoon, and night, trusting you, trusting that you will keep him safe. And you're standing here, about to shatter his entire world, his entire sense of reality, in the cruelest way imaginable. The woman shifted uncomfortably, her defensive posture tightening. "My circumstances have changed," she said, the words coming out clipped and rehearsed. It was the classic catch-all excuse, a vague shield to deflect judgment. And to be perfectly clear, there are legitimate, gut-wrenching, and completely valid reasons why a person might have to give up a beloved pet. Catastrophic illness, a sudden and devastating financial disaster, or housing instability are profound human tragedies that force impossible choices. But Liam, who had become an unwilling expert in human excuses, wasn't hearing tragedy in her voice. He was hearing the flat, metallic tone of convenience. "Your circumstances have changed?" He shot back, his voice rising, now drawing the attention of other shoppers who began to pause, their carts stopping mid-aisle. Did his circumstances change? Did he suddenly stop being loyal? Is he any less of a good boy today than he was yesterday? Or did he just get old? Did he just start needing a little more from you? Did he just become an inconvenience you'd rather not deal with? Then, in a move that shattered every retail rule in the book, a move that would have gotten him fired on the spot under normal circumstances, he walked out from behind the counter. He closed the small gap between them and knelt on the cold, hard floor in front of Max. The old dog, sensing a gentle energy, a friend, leaned forward without hesitation and gave Liam's outstretched hand a soft, trusting lick. Liam began to stroke the dog's head, his touch tender, his eyes never leaving the woman's face. "Do you have any idea, any concept at all of what happens to senior dogs when they get surrendered to a shelter?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, sharp, conspiratorial whisper that was somehow more arresting than a shout. "They are the last to be chosen and the first to be forgotten. People want puppies, a blank slate, a cute little ball of fluff. They don't want a dog with a little history, a little arthritis in his hips. They don't want a dog whose eyes are a little cloudy. So he'll end up in a shelter. And do you know what a shelter is like for a dog who has only known a home? It's not a fun place. It's like being thrown into a foreign prison for a crime you didn't commit. It's 100 other dogs barking and crying in terror and confusion, the constant deafening noise, the overwhelming smell of fear and disinfectant, the cold concrete floor that makes his old bones ache. He will shut down. This beautiful, gentle, trusting soul will get depressed and anxious, and he will stop being the dog you know." He looked straight up at her from the floor, his own eyes now glistening with unshed tears of rage and sorrow. "He will sit in a metal cage, utterly and completely confused, spending every waking moment trying to figure out what he did wrong to make you leave him there. He'll spend every second of every day waiting for you to come back through that door. Every time he hears footsteps approaching his kennel, his heart will leap, thinking it's you. And day after day, week after week, you won't show up. His spirit will break. I promise you, with every fiber of my being, it will break. And because he's a senior, because he's not a cute puppy anymore, his chances of ever being adopted again are next to zero. The adoption rate for senior dogs is around 25%, compared to 60% for younger dogs. He is the most likely to be overlooked, to become invisible. Or, if the shelter is full, and let me tell you, they are always, always full, he could be put on a list. Do you know what list I'm talking about, ma'am? He could be euthanized, not because he's sick, not because he's aggressive, but just because he's old and you were done with him. His life will be ended because he was no longer convenient for you. You could have heard a pin drop in the sprawling store, The gentle bubbling of the fish tank suddenly sounded like a roar in the crushing silence. 5 years, Liam said, his voice rising again as he pushed himself to his feet, his knees cracking. He was standing tall now, no longer an employee, but an advocate. You had him for 5 years. That's a lifetime for him. You were his sun, his moon, his entire universe, and you made him a promise. You stood in a shelter and you told the people there that you would be his forever home. Forever doesn't stop when it gets hard. Forever doesn't stop when they get old. He is not a subscription service you can just cancel when you're bored with it. He is a member of your family. He took one more step closer, invading her personal space, forcing her to confront the reality of the moment. He has given you nothing but pure, unconditional love for half a decade. He has celebrated your joys with a wagging tail and comforted your sorrows with a gentle head on your lap. And your answer, now that he's getting to the part of his life where he'll need you the most, where he might need medication, or a slower walk, or just a little more patience, is to bring him to a retail store and ask for, what? What did you expect? A refund? Store credit? What is the going rate for 5 years of unwavering loyalty, ma'am? Please tell me. I'd love to process that transaction for you. The woman was stunned into silence, her defiant facade completely crumbled, replaced by a raw, exposed shame. She finally looked away from Liam, her gaze dropping for the first time to the dog at her feet. As if sensing the shift, sensing her distress, Max let out a low, confused whine, a soft question mark of a sound. I won't do it, Liam said, his voice now firm, resolute, and final. He stepped back behind the perceived safety of the counter, reclaiming his post, but not his earlier subservience. You can call my manager. You can call corporate. You can stand here and scream until you get me fired. And honestly, right now, I truly do not care. But I will not be the person who processes the paperwork that sends this beautiful, trusting dog down a path that ends in heartbreak and death. You need to look him in the eyes and understand what you are doing. You need to take him home. He turned away from her then, busying himself with a non-existent task at his register, the conversation over. The silence that followed was immense, profound, broken only by the soft, metallic jingle of Max's collar tags as he shifted his weight, still waiting, still hoping, a silent, furry testament to a love that was on the verge of being thrown away. Section 2. The Firestorm. A rant goes viral. The video was just under 3 minutes long, 3 minutes of raw, unfiltered, and deeply uncomfortable emotion. Jessica, the woman filming from the next aisle, stopped recording with trembling hands. She posted it to her social media accounts a short time later, not with any intent of creating a sensation, but because she was so profoundly moved by Liam's passionate defense and utterly heartbroken for the old, gray-muzzled dog at the center of it all. Her caption was simple, heartfelt, and to the point. This PetSmart employee is an absolute hero. This poor dog deserves so much better. I don't know what happens next, but I hope he's okay. By the time she woke up the next morning, her phone was a chaotic mess of notifications. The video had 1 million views. By the end of that day, as it was shared and reshared across platforms, it was hitting 10 million. Liam's rant, clipped and repurposed, became a trending sound on TikTok, the audio of his impassioned speech laid over videos of people hugging their own senior pets. It was sparking furious debate in comment sections and forums around the world. The internet did what it does best. It exploded. The story was a perfect recipe for a viral sensation. It had raw, powerful emotion, a clear and righteous hero in a blue polo shirt, and an obvious, easily identifiable villain. The initial reaction was a massive, overwhelming tidal wave of support for Liam. People from all over the world flooded PetSmart's social media pages with demands that Liam not only keep his job, but be given a promotion and a significant raise. They argued that his compassion shouldn't be a fireable offense, it should be official company policy. One comment, which was liked over 100,000 times, read, "This young man gets it. A pet is for life, for their entire life. Not just for the cute, easy, Instagrammable parts, but for the hard, expensive, and sad parts too." He has more integrity in his little finger than most corporate CEOs. But as the video's reach grew, a smaller but increasingly vocal group began to push back, sparking a fierce and necessary debate about the ethics of online shaming and mob justice. "We don't know her full story," one widely shared comment argued. What if she just lost her job and her home? What if she was just diagnosed with a terminal illness and has no one to care for her dog? Sometimes, making the decision to rehome a pet is the most responsible, though deeply painful thing you can do for them. This counter-narrative kicked off a massive, sprawling debate that took over social media for days. Is surrendering a pet always a selfish act of convenience? Or can it be a necessary, agonizing last resort for a person in a desperate crisis? People began sharing their own gut-wrenching stories of having to say goodbye to a beloved animal due to circumstances beyond their control. Stories of allergies, financial ruin, and personal tragedies. They argued that creating a digital mob to shame and harass one woman, without knowing any of the facts of her situation, was its own form of cruelty, a high-tech witch hunt that ignored all nuance. The video became a powerful symbol for our disposable pet culture, a hashtag that started trending globally. People used it to draw sharp parallels between modern pet ownership and fast fashion. Loved for a season, paraded for its novelty, and then discarded without a second thought when it is no longer new, perfect, or convenient. Rescue organizations, recognizing a pivotal moment, seized the opportunity. They used the video's massive audience as a national teaching moment. They flooded the web with data, infographics, and heartbreaking testimonials showing how senior animals are the most at-risk population in shelters, often waiting far longer for a new home than a puppy or a young dog. They posted articles and videos explaining in detail how a happy, well-adjusted house pet can rapidly deteriorate in a shelter environment, becoming withdrawn, anxious, and seemingly unadoptable, eventually becoming another tragic statistic. Before long, major news channels picked up the story, running segments with titles like "The Rant Heard Round the World." PetSmart found itself in an incredibly tough and precarious position. An employee had openly and aggressively defied a customer, a cardinal sin in the world of retail. Standard procedure would call for immediate termination. But firing him now would be a public relations catastrophe of epic proportions. So, the company did what large corporations do when they're trapped. They issued a carefully worded, non-committal statement. "We are aware of the video and are looking into the situation internally. We are committed to the welfare of all animals and take this matter very seriously." It was corporate speak for, "We're stalling for time while we figure out how to spin this." While the internet raged, debated, and dissected every second of the 3-minute clip, and while a corporation in a skyscraper strategized its next move, Liam was at home. He was sitting in his small apartment, the phone ringing incessantly with calls from news producers and morning shows, anxiously waiting to find out if he would lose the job that paid his tuition. And a sweet, gentle, gray-muzzled dog named Max was still completely, blissfully unaware that his life, and the lives of thousands of other animals like him, had just been irrevocably changed by a stranger's righteous fury. Section 3. The Aftermath and a Glimmer of Hope. The professional fallout for Liam was swift, though uncertain. His store manager, a decent man caught between corporate policy and his own admiration for what Liam had done, called him and gently told him to stay home with pay while corporate investigated. Liam spent the next 24 hours pacing the length of his small apartment, dodging calls from producers at national news outlets and watching thousands of friend requests and supportive messages pile up on his social media profiles. He was genuinely scared of getting fired, of losing the income he desperately needed. But a much bigger, more resolute part of him knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he would do it all again in a heartbeat. Some things were more important than a job. For the woman in the video, the experience was an unmitigated nightmare. In the dark corners of the internet, amateur sleuths, with a misplaced sense of justice, quickly figured out who she was. Her name, photos, and workplace were shared online, and the subsequent wave of online harassment was vicious, relentless, and cruel. A brutal, terrifying lesson in the dark side of viral fame. She was forced to delete her social media accounts and unplug from a world that had judged and condemned her without a trial. But what about Max? In the midst of all this human chaos, what happened to the quiet, dignified dog at the center of the storm? This is where the story pivots, turning away from anger and judgment and toward a glimmer of profound hope. After Liam's firm and final refusal, the woman, looking stunned and defeated, had turned and walked out of the store with Max in tow. But Jessica, the bystander who had filmed the entire encounter, felt a pull she couldn't ignore. She paid for her dog bed and followed them out into the hot, sun-baked parking lot. She approached,